Welcome back to another episode of Narrowing the Divide. Today I have the opportunity to speak with a great friend. We've been friends I'm just going to invite you on right now, Anita, and I'm going to read your bio in a second. But Anita
Yep.
Anello is my guest today. Anita, we've been friends for what, 3 or 4 years now?
Yeah. Yep. I'm trying to think back as to when we met. It was probably maybe like right past pandemic, right after that.
Yeah, and we met originally in Dan Miller's community, 48
hmm
Days Eagles.
Yep.
We both went through certification to be facilitators of the 48 Days to the Work and Life You Love workshops.
Yep.
Did you go through the coaching certification with them as well?
I did not. I had
Okay,
gone through just the facilitators track,
okay,
and I remember you and I having conversations in those days with another good friend of ours, Colleen, and just
yes,
being able to like break down the process that we walked through just to figure out our next steps. Like I know that that was so impactful for us as a small group of people. There were maybe, I don't know, like 5 or 6 of us. Like it's kind of a pretty intimate group of being able to say, hey, we've walked through this material. It's been super impactful. So then therefore we want to come alongside with Dan Miller and his organization and help get that message out to other people.
yes, yes. And what a great experience. I'm so glad you mentioned breaking down the steps because yeah, I mean, that just helps me frame. Just to be transparent, Anita and I talked about this before the episode recording and
Yep.
said I was going to frame this call a little bit more than just saying, you know what, here, Anita, let's talk. I threw it all away because I was trying to break it down too simple, and it made sense to just be transparent about what it is
Yep.
that's happening here, and that was a great introduction. I want to do you justice and serve you well. You're a coach, you're a consultant. You've come with some great experience coming out of the tech world and moving into that's just one example of the communities that you and I have both been a part of. I
hmm
want to talk a little bit more about some of the other things that we have done that are in alignment, just because it's been great to see you grow and be part of that journey and learning together as you talked about all this
hmm
time. It's been wonderful. So let me pop open your bio here. Anita helps corporate women of faith in the tech industry who want to break free of corporate life and develop a consulting business by providing spiritual guidance and support as they transition into a new phase of their career. She offers practical advice and resources to help them establish and grow their consulting business, such as tips for building a client base, setting rates, and finding a healthy work-life balance as they work towards their goal of working 20 hours a week while making 2 to 3 times their previous income. I don't think that does you justice. So I'm just going to
Ah,
start there.
thank you.
We just talked about your gifts as well, and that was one of the things that stood out. Is it's not just helping them define those steps, because what you're doing is much more powerful than that. And I think that's probably the biggest benefit to anyone listening to this episode. I just was engaged in a conversation in a podcasting chat this morning that someone said that we should never interview guests who are in the same space as us. And I absolutely disagree, because
Yeah.
there may be people listening to me that would never hire me to work with them as their coach.
Right.
They have experience and expertise that could potentially be your ideal partner in coaching or
hmm
consulting. And so I'm happy to share these experiences with my audience.
I think too that perspective of if you and I are in the same space, we don't want to talk with one another. That's a mindset of like somehow we're always in competition with one another. And I can say definitely coming from the corporate space, I had that mentality for a really long time. Like everything was a competition, and I'm kind of a competitive person naturally. So, you know,
Yes.
so there's all that going on. But what I've realized over the last couple of years since I've had this business is that you and I can show up in the same way, Dan,
Hmm.
and we're never going to be competitors, because here's the thing: we have different life experiences, we have different perspectives on things, we see things a little bit differently. In our we experience life differently, we have different relationships and backgrounds and all this kind of stuff. we even speak differently. And so
Yes.
what I love about just this world that we're in is there's more than enough room for everybody. And we're not actually competitors. In my mind,
Right.
we complement one another and we can support each other. Because don't you know, I can show up on a podcast and someone's going to be like, that's my girl right there. Like, she's amazing. Her experience, the trials she's walked through, the story that she has to tell, her life experience, she's going to come shoulder to shoulder me. I like the way she looks. I like the way that her voice sounds. And then you hear somebody else and go, no, 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 they're totally not for me. Like, I get asked the question all the time, how do you pick a coach?
Mm.
It's these things that we're talking about. Their story resonates with you. They have the experience that you're looking for. They've gone down the path and they're going to help you. They're willing to like reach a hand back and walk forward. You like the way they sound. Maybe you like the way they look. Maybe you're aware of these things. Maybe you're not. Maybe you just feel like, I don't know, something about them, their vibe, I'm just drawn to that. Like,
Yes.
those are all those elements that I think are super important when we start having these conversations. And then you start to realize, like, a competition, like, we're not in competition. I'm just going to show up and be me, and people are going to like that. And some people are not going to like that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we're actually designed to work with everybody in the world anyway.
Absolutely agree. And what a great way to stress that point. And there's 8 billion people in this world. I
Yeah.
can't possibly work with all of them, nor do I ever want to work with all of them.
Right.
I'm looking for, a very select few, if I'm being honest, right?
Yes.
Ideally. And I just was writing and journaling about this morning, thinking about my goals as I shift back into the work that I'm doing more and more. I really, I took some time off, took some time away and did some rediscovery and, decided on a few points of clarity, what I wanted to be doing moving forward. And it landed me back into the world of coaching. So this is my next step. If you and I talked about that ahead of this call as well. But that's what I found is I only want to be working with as one-on-one coaching, 5 or 6 people at any given time, no more than that. And less than that is great. That gives me the space to ensure that I'm serving each and every one of them the way that I want to be serving them, which is, 150% all in.
So let's even like break down a little bit more, Dan, like the path that we're all
Yes.
on, whether you're in the employment space or in the entrepreneur space. Like,
Please.
I'll just kind of take it right. Like, in the employment space, let's look at it this way. You have a boss that you report to at some point. Even if you're at the top of the organization, you might have a board that you report to. But somebody's telling you these are the goals, or you're helping to decide these are the goals. And then the path is pretty clear. Sell stuff, serve people well, make some money, all that kind of stuff. Like, that's the whole purpose of business, is to actually make money. Let's just be clear. Like, that's the foundation of what we do. So we're good with that. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Then when you jump into the entrepreneurial space, sometimes the structure that we had in the corporate world, all of a sudden we're like, hooray, I have all this free time. I have all these ideas and all this kind of stuff. And what can happen is, if we're not careful, if we're not really diligent, is we can kind of go way over the edge and we can work twice as much and make no money at all. Like, let's just be clear. That totally happens in the entrepreneurial space. Not because we wanted to, but it's just sometimes it can be part of the journey. But what you said was really interesting to me, because you and I have kind of danced around this conversation the last 2 times that we've talked, both this morning and a couple of weeks ago when we just were chatting on the phone. And that was about, like, what I really want to clarify for the audience is the next steps. Like, everybody's just taking their next steps. There's no mistakes. There's no like, I got off my path. I think actually part of the journey of life, the longer I live, the more that I do what I do, the path kind of like, yes, there's the idea that I have. And that's almost like I see things in pictures, thoughts kind of come to me in pictures. And so the picture is like, yes, the path seems straight. I just want to go after and I want to do this thing. I want to have this goal. But the journey is like the zig, the zag, like, I go back and forth. I might feel like I take a step back and then I take a couple of steps forward and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's actually the adventure. that we're on. If you come from a faith background, like I'm going to frame stuff in the way that I know how, and that means
Yeah.
that I'm going to talk about God. And I believe actually God's totally okay with the journey of life. And he expects us as his kids to be like, well, I'm going to go over here, and then I'm going to go over there, and then I'm going to kind of go here. But he's a good dad. Like, and if I'm really going to get like off the path, he's a good dad. He's always going to bring me back in, just like we're good parents to our kids. We're going to be like, hey, you kind of got off track a little bit. And so then, I actually have really been pondering this as my life has taken these radical left turns that I did not expect. And
Yes.
it's still like leaning in to be like, oh, okay. Are we going over here? Medical crisis? I mean, okay, I didn't plan that, but yeah, that's part of the journey. Oh, we're going over here, like job loss. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, again, that wasn't part of the plan, but then I prayed and I feel like, okay, God, what do you want me to do? What's my next step? I feel like I get that download. I take those next steps. Doesn't really pan out the way that I thought it was. Don't reach my goals. And yet that journey of learning. So one thing I love about you, Dan, is I can say with confidence, every single conversation that I've ever had with you, you have shared with me the journey. And I love that about you. I love the transparency of sharing, like, well, okay, I'm on this next step in my journey. Even when you couldn't see it for yourself. And I said, hey, don't forget, you're just taking your next step. You're kind of like, oh, that's right. And right back to it. Like it took less than a half of a second for you to realize like, oh, that's right. I'm actually on this journey. So I just want to encourage somebody who feels like they got off track today as they're listening to us have this part of the conversation. You're not off track. You're just on a journey. It's an adventure, and just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and just take that next step forward.
Well, and I so appreciate that reminder and the words you shared, especially about me. And here's why is I retired from the Army in 2018. And just prior to that, I had certified as a story brand guide. And I'll never forget the moment that helped me to recognize the journey piece and focusing. Now, I have spent the last 6 or so years intentionally focusing on the journey and staying in tune with those steps and not mistakes and all of those pieces that we can talk about, especially in the entrepreneurial world. And I hear it from clients all the time is, not getting caught up in that past piece and the potential for those mistakes, because they all are truly lessons. Some of them good, some of them not so good. And being able to take the lessons as you continue in that journey has been so important. I shared with you, I took a few months out. I went overseas for 3 months this last year, and enjoyed every minute of it. But what it really helped me see was the adventure that I was a part of and embracing, learning over the last few years to embrace adventure more has been a journey of discovery for me, getting back in touch with who I was, who I am, who I was meant to be before being in the military. Because, while you're in the military, it's easy to get caught up in, but really there's a lot of work that I had a discussion with somebody the other day. There's a lot of work that goes into creating a soldier.
Oh yeah.
They teach you, they train you, and they instill in you the identity of a soldier. So there was a point in time I was lost in that identity, is how I would describe it. And getting back in touch with that is not an easy transition, but I digress. So I was going to say the one thing that stands out to me is I heard Gary Vaynerchuk say that there are not enough people documenting the journey. And so that triggered something with me. And I try to be mindful and share that experience with people when the opportunity presents itself, because not enough people get to hear the hard parts. They only get to see the highlights.
Oh yeah. And don't we know there's a lot of hard parts to life.
We talked about that in our last conversation before today. You and I have both experienced some different difficulties we won't go into here, but it just is a reminder of exactly what we're talking about. I can't thank you enough, by the way, for being there with me when those conversations happen and hearing from you the experiences that you share with me and being able to share with someone those experiences from my perspective, and just having someone that can listen intently and then be able to provide guidance from their own perspective if asked for. And that's the other thing is, I know you, and I know that you don't just jump in and say, "Hey, this is how you should do things."
Yeah.
You help people with that discernment as well. So I want to go over a couple points you brought up, if that's okay. Making money. So as a woman of faith, I know I certified with Ramsey Solutions more than once.
Oh yeah.
And there's a very faith-driven piece of that mission, especially the first time I went through the financial coaching training there. It was led by their faith team at that point, or their ministry team. But one of the conversations I have heard so many times and been a part of so many times is, how do you navigate that story of making money versus ministry in the work that you're doing? I agree with you. We're in business to make money. I'm happy to make money and to make a profit, to be specific, right? I have no qualms with that, but I'm just curious, how do you navigate that conversation when it comes up?
Okay, so I'm just a little side note ahead of time. I'm probably going to rock some worlds right here. So I think this is kind of where I've come on this journey of going. Let me just frame it first, of going from being taught as a kid, money's bad, money's evil, having money is somehow going to destroy your life. The only people that have money are the bad people, or it leads to adultery or drug abuse or alcoholism and all these negative things. Okay. So that has previously been my frame of reference. I've worked a lot of years to try to unravel that nonsense. I do believe when I read scripture and God talks about the abundance that he has for us as his kids, right, is that he's a God of abundance. He has everything for us. Like there's lots and lots and lots of scripture that supports the fact that God's okay with us making money. What he's not okay with is where I idolize that money. So that's the only difference. So hopefully right there, we're going to set somebody free from that nonsense, because it's a total lie that somehow money's bad or whatever. First of all, money's amoral. It's not good or bad or whatever. But the more, by the way, as a believer, as a Christian, the more money that I have, the more that I can do, the more I can bless people, the more I can honor people, the more I can, and that includes my own household, the more that I can further the kingdom, further the gospel message, the more I can pour into things. So again, I'm just kind of setting some framework. The other thing that I was studying at the probably last year, I think it was at the tail end, if you look up in Mark, I think it's in Mark 2, where they talk about Jesus is born. And the Magi, not three wise men, by the way, the Magi bring so many gifts to Jesus at his birth and his parents that I would wonder, I haven't done the research on it, but I would wonder if you look back at the historical facts of the amount of money that was, right? It's like gold, frankincense, myrrh, all these different things that were given to Jesus as that birth. I actually wonder if that provided enough runway for his family that he had what he needed until he stepped into ministry full time. Okay. So I'm just going to hypothesize. It's not heresy. This is what I see when I read the scriptures. Okay.
Yeah.
I see God as God of abundance. I see that Jesus had a whole bunch of resources. I see that scripture talks about that he never had anything. He never wanted for anything. He had every time he asked his father gave him. Okay. The other thing that I have come to believe is I think that when we are in the church and somebody has this great idea, you want to serve this community, right? I serve I will say, ironically enough, because I was not raised in an environment, nor did I ever experience this in the corporate environment, that somehow I'm supposed to serve women.
Mm.
I think that's amazing. And it also makes me chuckle a little bit that these are the people that God's called me to serve. But I think that when we tell people that have risen to a level of success, hey, go start a ministry, and then that means like sell everything and don't have any worldly possessions or anything like that. I think that's actually some of the worst advice that we can give people, because if my hands are tied because now I have no resources available to me, how am I actually going to serve other people? Like, that whole idea that somehow I have to sell everything. Now, let me be clear. If God tells you specifically, sell your stuff and go do something, like, listen to God. Don't, run this by him first. But what I've noticed is more things than not is you have lots of folks that are in the church that are broken. They think that's more holy. I just don't see that modeled in scripture at all. I think that's a message that man's given, specifically in the United States. I think it's part of this watered down gospel. That's probably another part of a conversation to have. But actually, I think we can do so much more. When I have money to save, when I have money to tithe, when I have money to invest, when I have money to grow, when I have money to be able to prosper, like scripture says that I'm supposed to prosper as my soul prospers. And prosperity, the definition of prosperity is not just money. It's actually all things. It's health, wealth, spiritual.
Yes.
It's all these different things. Right. And so then I'll kind of end it with this. When I study the Proverbs woman, and that lady's industrious. She's an entrepreneur. She's the very definition of an entrepreneur that's going out. She's getting up early. She's providing for her household. She's called blessed. Her husband is honored because of the things that she does. Like, they as a team work together and they have this entrepreneurial mindset and because of that, they have abundance in their household. They can not only take care of themselves, but they can take care of their staff and their people and their community and all this kind of stuff. And so I actually think we do ourselves a disservice to believe, I'll go so boldly to say it, to believe a lie that somehow it's better to have nothing, and that's somehow more holy and more spiritual than if we had access to resources and then we can do all these things together. So
yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. I was just curious from your perspective. I hadn't heard it, and the opportunity presented itself. I am in 100% agreement. I think there are plenty of stories in the Bible, in Scripture, that show us that, given little, to expand is the expectation. Mm-hmm. And that's my belief. I also am, I come from a frame of mind where I was taught that, money stories, we'll just call it money stories. There's lots of them I could share, but, one of the ones that stands out is really related to messaging and how people take messaging, especially from Scripture, and they apply it in the way they want people to hear it. So we often hear misquoted information from the Bible about money. Specifically, the one that stands out that I hear consistently is money is the root of all evil. And it's not true. Right. The love of money, the idolization that you talked about, is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
Because
and what's like, let's talk about that. Why is that? It's really like God's a jealous God. He wants us. He wants a relationship with us. He wants intimacy with us. So if I put anything above my relationship with God, that could be my husband, that could be money, that could be my kids, that could be my house, that could be my car. It doesn't matter, all of it. Like, God's like, I'm not okay with all that because I love you. I want to be in relationship with you above all else. I've pursued you to be able to come back and have intimacy with me and be in relationship with me. And so anything that would supersede that, God's like, hey, by the way, you're my daughter, you're my son. Like, that's not good for you. Don't go over here and love this thing that's not going to fulfill your life. I could even entertain the idea that if I know, let me just put it this way. From my experience, when I've made the thing the only goal in my life and I've gotten the thing, don't you know, like almost immediately I'm like, okay, now I'm not satisfied again. What's the next thing?
Yeah, what's the next thing?
And that's because God knows that about our hearts.
Yeah. We do
Right.
that all the
And
time.
so hear that. It's not that the things are bad. There's nothing wrong with the things. Now I'm talking about, let me just be clear. I'm not talking about going after like, oh, I want something that's going to destroy my marriage, destroy me, destroy my family, all that kind of stuff. I'm just talking about the good and healthy things that we have and abundant. Like
Yeah.
I love the beach.
Yeah.
I love the beach. I love the ocean, all that kind of stuff. But if I made that my idol, that my God, that would be a bad thing.
Mm.
There's nothing wrong with the beach. It's the way that I perceive it. If I make it more important than my relationship with God and with man, then okay, then yeah, you know what? Yeah, that's okay, Anita. Shift. That's come back to what God wants me to be doing. Like it's beautiful. There's nothing to me. There's only two things on this earth that are like neck and neck of the most beautiful scenery. That's the ocean and the woods, like the redwoods in California. Like I love those two. Those two sceneries for me are like, that's my sweet spot right there.
Well, so I absolutely concur with you on the beach. I spend I was speaking with, as we're recording this last night, speaking with a client in a session, and that's, they asked me about my recharge space because I'm an extrovert, openly, honestly, admittedly, but I still need space to recharge. And so I enjoy sunsets and sunrises at the beach. And there's so many reasons why, but just walking in the sand, taking in the vastness of the ocean. And in my case, it's the Atlantic Ocean, because you talked about the redwoods, which I would love to see. Haven't been there, but I can take in that vastness and the paintings in the sky, all that nature and ability to just ground myself there is how I recharge. And so I absolutely love that piece. But you're absolutely right. In fact, I don't want to misquote it, but I think it's one of the commandments that talks about thou shalt have no other God or idol before me. So well said, and way to solidify those points. So thank you for that piece. The other one is, and you kind of, it might have already been covered in that piece, but as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as a consultant, we've already talked about some of our journey and some of the things you said, hard left turns. Oh, wait, I didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
How do you avoid, and how do you teach other people to avoid the shiny objects that all of us experience in that journey?
Okay, so I actually have come to look at it this way. So shiny objects, that's like one category of things. It's a distraction in front of me, and it's keeping me from doing a task that I'm supposed to do. I'll just make it super simple, right? Because I love simple.
Me
so
too.
Something that distracts me, it could be like my phone. So it doesn't matter what it is, Netflix, TikTok, I don't care. Like all great things, but if they are keeping me from something that I'm actually supposed to do, then it turns into distraction category. The only way that I know how to navigate that situation is to try to get my mind back as quickly as possible to, oh, I got off track. Now I'm going to get back on track. And so I think the things in life are really the same thing though, Dan, is that, okay, something happened. So 2 years ago, I shared with you that we had a situation where my husband went in for an outpatient procedure. About an hour later, instead of having the procedure, ended up in the emergency room.
Right.
Not planned. I mean, by the grace of God, he made it to where he got the medical attention that he needed for his life and and it was a life-saving moment for us. Okay, so we navigated that. Was it a distraction? No, it was a trial. Like we had to walk through that. We had to figure out what does life look like. It was difficult. It was super difficult, but it was where we were. I am probably, I dare say maybe especially in my household, I'm the most equipped to deal with like the kind of trauma or incidences that are, like my husband would say, there's nobody better in our household. Like if something radical is happening, Anita's going to be the one to like jump in and have like level head and fix things. Like that's just kind of that's the way I operate. I just get to work.
Right.
Even earlier this year, we were back in the emergency room. Okay. We're back in the emergency room with my husband, and we're driving over there and navigating it and talking about, like, we were talking about the kind of the fears of the situation and, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're back here again and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, wait a minute, time out. But look how far God's taken us. Like, do you know, because of 2 years ago, the events that happened 2 years ago, our marriage is radically shifted in such a positive way. And it's reignited just the way that we communicate with one another, the love and respect that we give to each other, the care that we have, the tenderness that we have, the longevity that we have, and recognizing, like, I don't want to do life without my husband. And so how do I actually model that and walk in that every single day, even if he does something that kind of bugs me? I mean, those things happen, right?
Yes, I'm sure that they do.
Right? Anytime you're in close relationship with anybody, we're always going to get to that point. So I think maybe the big thing for me, what I've learned in life and the lesson is, whatever it is, if it's a minor distraction that's a shiny, everybody loves to talk about these shining object syndrome right now, or if it's a full-blown like situation that needs a different attention, I don't care where you are in that spectrum. It's, how do I get back quickly? If my relationship with my husband gets off track, okay, how do we reset quickly? If something is a distraction, I went through a difficult situation 6 weeks ago. It got me off track.
Yes.
It was a whole bunch of stuff that was going on in my mind that got me off track. So the thing is, like, my responsibility is, how do I get back on track fast? So what I did is I recognized that I have my own blueprint to get myself back on track fast. This is my blueprint. So as I describe it, I want you to listen to what's your version of the blueprint. And then if you're listening to the podcast, jot down what your version is. Take a couple minutes when we're done, and you jot down what your blueprint for reset really is. So I'm just going to get real practical and tactical, because I love doing that. Like, how can I do something with the information in life, not stay ethereal and all in my head, but like, how can I do something? So what I realize is, some of the things that I do every single day is, when I get up in the morning, I try to practice some gratitude, a little bit of just like, wow, I woke up and I have breath in my lungs. That's amazing. I dive into scripture. I usually pray in that time. Then I go for a walk. I have some form of exercise, preferably outside. I love being outside. Then I'm setting my mind up for success in the morning. I am setting my body up for success in the morning. I get going about my day. I do the things that I know that I'm supposed to do. I love making lists. I'm like a list maker because I love checking things off the list. That helps me to feel a sense of accomplishment, all that kind of stuff. I connect with my people, all these kinds of things. At the end of the day, I have started, maybe last year, I read a book called by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan. It's The Gap in the Game. Okay. And he talks about how at the end of the day is the most important. The last hour before you go to bed is actually the most important hour of your entire day, because you journal all the great things that happens, all your wins, you write those down, and then you plan for the next day. What are going to be no more than 3? What are going to be my wins for the next day? So that practice, so that's my blueprint. And what I realized is the practice of doing those things for Anita every day, day in, day out, that resets me the fastest. So as you think about this, I would encourage you, as you're listening, figure out what your blueprint is for yourself. It doesn't have to be the things that I do. It could be whatever you do, whatever that looks like for you. Figure out what those things are that when you have like the day that you're like, yes, I'm firing, I'm on all cylinders. This is amazing. I know who I am. I know what my purpose is. I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm like, yeah, okay, I got this. Figure out on those days what your blueprint really is. Write it down for yourself and then post it up somewhere you can see it. So on the day where you feel like, can I say the word shit on your podcast?
Yes.
On the days when you lose your shit and you don't know what's going on, you can go back to your own blueprint And that's what I did. I reached out to people that I knew that can pray for me, that can talk through stuff. Like I went through my blueprint and then I added the things that I always do. I reach out to my community. I'm like, I'm struggling. What do I do? I talk to the people that I live with because they know me the best.
Yep.
Hey, mom. Hey, babe. I see that this is where you're a little bit off, because I've learned and they've learned when I come to them and I say, something's off and I don't know what it is. Can you guys help me? This is what I'm walking through. We as a family, we've cultivated an environment where we as a family can be a safe place, and somebody will say, oh, I think you're doing great over here, but I think you're just I think it's always like this tiny little chiropractic shift. Like that's all it takes. And then your whole trajectory changes. Right?
Yes.
So it's all those elements that I mapped out. For me, I also include reaching out to people that I know, because they help, just like Dan and I were talking about earlier, they help me see my blind spots. And they go, wait a minute, what do you mean you're off track? You're not off track. Like you might feel like you're off track today, but that's the other element that I use in my personal blueprint, is that I go through these things. It's a discipline. That's what it boils down to. This is my discipline for success that allows me to go and do the things that I can do. And on the days when I can't, I mean, some days you just need a break. Let's just be clear.
Yeah, absolutely. Take that time to recharge when you recognize that, things are not feeling like they should. And that's usually when I'll go watch sunset in the morning.
Yeah.
With sunset in the morning. You know what I mean?
There you go.
But yeah, that's when I'll go watch a sunrise and just enjoy that moment. I'll spend, a couple hours there. I might go surfing that day. Who knows? But, it all leads to feeling re-energized and reconnecting with where it is I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to be doing, because it's not hard to get off track when you have a lot going on, especially. Now, that's actually a good segue as we move towards, I recognize, our time together. So moving towards wrapping up, you're working with women who are, and men, to be clear, who are coming out of that corporate environment, especially in the tech space. They have a lot going on. And now they're trying to navigate what it looks like to shift gears completely, because, well, working for yourself looks a whole lot different than having all that structured day in and day out. Even if you're at the top, there's much more structure in that field in corporate than there ever will be initially or later, depending on what you do to set yourself up for success. But there's a lot of structure that's missing. So there's a lot going on. What do you, what would you say to just encourage those people? One of the things I want to say is coaching. You pointed out, even reaching out to people can help you see your blind spots. But I think that there's tremendous value. And in fact, I believe that that's one of the biggest pieces of value that coaches can offer, is that outside perspective in who it is that they're spending time with, right? Helping people see their blind spots. But beyond that, what would you offer to them as words of encouragement, aside from finding a great coach to navigate that space?
Yeah, the coaching component is key for two big reasons. And I'll just kind of piggyback on what you're talking about, Dan. It's key because when I invest, then I show up differently. So when I make a financial investment, I totally show up differently than if I'm doing free stuff. So nothing against free stuff. There's a lot of amazing free stuff out there, but I know, and I know from my clients, when they show up for the prices that I charge, man, they show up, right? They really show up. So that's it. And then the accountability part of being able to say, oh my gosh, especially when we've come from the corporate space and we're used to the accountability. We have these KPIs. If you don't know what that means, it's key performance indicators, right? So I have these KPIs that I have to meet for my sales or my revenue and all these kinds of things. Like we know how to operate in a setting where we're setting goals and achieving those goals in the corporate space, because we've done that our whole career. And then we move over to the entrepreneur space. And if we don't have somebody that can hold us accountable and I dare say, and I would really challenge somebody who might be thinking, I could do that for free with my best friend. You could, but I'll bet you money. I'll bet you a nickel. You'll probably show up differently if you invest and plunk down some money. So that'd be one thing that I would say that's really, really key. The other part is creating a plan to be able to move forward. And here's why. Let's say, like in my household for many seasons, my husband and I have shared the responsibility of watching our kids and somebody be the primary breadwinner. We've kind of traded that back and forth. Many times I've been the primary breadwinner and he's helped out, and then we've exchanged roles. So if I'm the primary breadwinner and then all of a sudden I say, hey, by the way, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go be an entrepreneur. The stress level that was potentially, okay, let me frame this. Because I was already working probably more than 50 hours a week in my corporate job as a successful person, then I don't know, from my experience, I used to work like 80 hours a week. And so that was, if I went down to 40 hours, for me, that was like a part-time gig, right?
Yes.
So I have all this commitment over here and I'm the primary breadwinner. And then all of a sudden, if I say, you know, God's really just calling me to like quit everything and just, I'm not sure how we're going to like make our mortgage payment. Can I just say, like, don't do that. Now, again, if you're hearing the audible voice of God and he's telling you to do something like that, well, then you take it up with him and you guys figure that out together. But most people, 99.9% of people, I would say, don't do that. That's not a good idea because you'll just increase the stress and you'll increase your neediness to go after and find clients. So what I do recommend and what I walk clients through as I coach them through is creating a plan to transition over from, you have this great income over here. That's amazing. Let's help to replace that. Let's put you on a path of success to replace that. How do we figure out what's your what I call your specialized knowledge? Like, what's your superpower that you want to be able to take that skill set and then create an amazing offer where I can charge like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times as much or 10 times as much as what I already make in the corporate space right now. And so we're figuring out what your skill set is. We're figuring out how to use the network that you're already in right now to be able to cultivate the relationships that you've probably spent a lot of years cultivating already. We are figuring out the plan to be able to move forward. I love to be able to say, this is a goal. And right off the bat, this is just the way that God speaks to me. I'm able to say, here's the steps that you're going to take backwards. And then we put it to a calendar and this is going to be your roadmap. So we make it super personalized. Every single client of mine has different circumstances, different skill sets, different networks, different abilities. They have different areas where they need to grow a little bit more before they transition over. And then we start working on executing the plan so that they can get clients under their belt and then prove to themselves that, oh my gosh, I could actually do that. And then we figure out like, what's the threshold money-wise and client-wise of, okay, if I get X amount of clients, because that number is always different for everybody, then I can see that, and I get the pipeline built up, I can see that I have the trajectory to replace the income that I have over there so that the transition from one area of work to the other is a little bit more smoothly. Now, let me just say the mechanics of the business are not that hard. No. It's like 15% of what we're going to do. The big challenge when you shift from an employee mindset to shift to an entrepreneur mindset, about 85% of the work goes on up in your head and in your heart. So that also takes a plan of how do I shift from somebody's been responsible for telling me what to do for the last 10, 15, 20 years. And then I'm going to go over here. I want all this freedom, Anita. Okay. But then sometimes, kind of like our kids. Oh, you can go and do whatever you want. Stay up as long as you want. They stay up till midnight and they're cranky the next day and they're kind of make a mess of their life and everybody around them. We don't want that. We want to be able to create a situation where as you're transitioning both your revenue and your mindset over to the entrepreneurial world and that journey. So here's the thing, like you can shift the way that your money comes in, but that doesn't necessarily shift your mindset. This part can take longer.
So good.
And sometimes it can also be a little bit harder. It just depends on how willing, you are to say, okay, I'm willing to learn. I think the other part of the journey that we walk through a lot is when I've been in the corporate space and I've had all this experience and the evidence that says I
Mm-hmm.
am I am amazing at what I do. It shows up in my title, it shows up in my income, it shows up in my bonuses, it shows up in my lifestyle. I'm so good at what I do because I have the evidence around me. My clients tell me all the time, this is awesome. Anita, you're so cool. Yes, you're so great. Then you shift over to another area. So Dan, we've been homeschooling for like 15 years. We've been on this journey for a long time.
Yeah.
You know that there were lots of times when I was homeschooling my kids where the feedback was not very positive. Mom, I have to, usually it was in the middle of winter, like the middle of February was always like our baby meltdown stage, I would call it, where everything would go crazy. And I'd be like, this is crazy. I'm getting no thanks. I'm not getting paid. And my kids don't want to do their work today. And it would usually be about a week time frame. I'd be like, that's it. Everybody's going back to private school and I'm going back to work. And then my husband would come in and he'd be like, all right, settle down. So my point in saying that is when I shift over to the entrepreneurial space, sometimes I can feel and I can trick myself and think, but I don't have the evidence of being good over here. But I have to learn a different skill set, and that's hard. And I haven't done that in a long time. I haven't grown. I haven't stretched myself. So that's where it can be really challenging when we make this transition, and having somebody walk you through the process and saying like, oh, I've been through that. I know what it's like. I know what you're experiencing, whether that's Dan helping you through that transition or me helping you or anybody else, whoever's your sweet spot of your coach that that resonates with you. You find somebody to help you on the journey, because there's going to be a lot of things that come up. There's a lot of emotions that come up. There's just a lot of like fears that all of a sudden surface that weren't there before. Think of like one thing. What happened if you lost your medical insurance? For a lot of people, that would like freak them out because they feel like the reason that I have a job for somebody else is for the insurance.
I run into that all the time in conversation. Yeah, that's
oh my gosh,
I
can't possibly go to these things because what about my insurance?
Yeah.
So I'm not knocking that. I'm just acknowledging that's kind of a thing, right? In a household that has experienced hospital bills, let's say 2 big times out of the last 2 years, like, yes, bills have to get paid. Yes, they definitely do. But working through those elements of where am I going to get clients? Where's revenue going to come from? What skill set am I really good at? Like at our age, I'll just say this. We're probably really good at hundreds and hundreds of things.
Yes.
But that does not mean that I want to build a business around that. It does not mean that it's my like passion, my expertise, my purpose. That I always see it as a funnel. Like I'm really good at 1,000 things, let's say, but that doesn't mean that I should build a business around. I'm good at gardening. I don't want to build a business around gardening because we're only working on my own yard. I don't want to work on somebody else's weeds. So
I can feel that. Yeah.
Right. Some things are just hobbies. Some things are, I don't want to do that. So it takes time to kind of like narrow that focus down and say like, okay, like a target. We're going to specifically go after this, saying this is really my skill set. This is what I love. I love doing it more than anything. You'll hear people say like, I could do it even if I didn't get paid, that kind of, what is that one thing? So you start figuring out those things. So practically, if you're listening to our conversation today and you want to start some of this stuff on your own, I would say start journaling. What is it that you're really good at? What do you want to do? What is it that so excites your brain? You're like, boom, I could go build a business around this. Where is there already a market that's doing that? Because like my gardening experience, I know there's some great people that totally dabble in the gardening space and build amazing businesses around that. It's just not I don't want to do that for somebody else. But I don't know, let's take another hobby. I'm going to think of a hobby. I'm sure somebody already has a business. I saw a lady that has a really super profitable business around patterns,
Mm.
like for sewing
Yeah.
patterns.
There's a
And
big
I was like,
industry for that.
wow, this is the thing. This
Yeah.
is so cool. I didn't even know that. I didn't know you could make money on that. Right. So I take the idea of all the things that I'm really good at. I start journaling about, well, what would I really want to do? What I like to do sometimes, I take clients through what I call like the perfect day exercise. So from like the time you get up to the time you go to sleep, just journal. Just take like 15-30 minutes and just write down everything. What would the most amazing life look like?
Yep.
The only rule for that exercise is you cannot edit yourself, even if it feels like unachievable at this point. And then you just kind of read through it and you see like where can you connect the dots of what you're already doing, what you're successful in, and what you want to do. And you start figuring out what are the resources that can take me to the next step. You start asking questions.
That's a great exercise. I've done that exercise and discovered a few things about me and, themes that showed up that I wasn't aware of until I did that exercise. So it is fascinating. And yeah, you've driven some great points through that home, if you will. There was a few things that came up, but I'll let people discern for themselves because I want to honor your time, Anita, and I want to make sure that we give people some resources that can help them. But before I do, that takes me to a question of resources. So you've mentioned lists and goals and planning. I don't normally ask this question, but what is your favorite resource right now for keeping things in order, lists and goals and all of those pieces?
This is going to surprise probably somebody.
Uh-oh.
I've tried a bunch of tools, like on my phone. I've tried a bunch of tools like in the tech space. And actually, one thing that I've come back to doing is writing everything down on paper.
Yes.
There's something really powerful about me writing things out on paper. So on my paper calendar that sits on my desk right now in my journal, it's going to sound simple, but it's so powerful for me to actually write stuff down. And I feel like I actually have a stronger connection and a stronger accountability when I write the stuff down. So while I do have all the apps on my phone and on my computer, I love all those things. And yet what I'm finding is that for me right now, I'm just very aware that they're causing me I have a bunch of goals that I've set up for this year in particular. And when I use the electronic versions of the goal setting, tasks, habits, trackers, all that kind of stuff, I don't feel as connected to the goals and the achievements and that. So actually I'm coming back to physically writing stuff down. And like I started to say, there's something very special that happens, this connection that we make in our brain when we write something out.
Physically writing, yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I asked that question because you said something earlier on, keeping things simple to threes when it comes to, creating your priorities for the next day is what you were talking about as you look at your reset. What did you call that? Your reset blueprint. At the end of the day, you're journaling and you're getting those 3 wins that you want to achieve tomorrow. And I'll just share, I'm not an affiliate and that's fine with me, but I've been using the Full Focus Journal and the Full Focus Planner, both by Michael Hyatt, for several years now. And that's what I really love is it keeps you focused on those 3. What are your big 3 priorities for the month, for the week, and for the day? Yeah. And it's a great way to refresh at the end of the day, capture those. And then I also journal to capture a bit more about any of that. And I love those things. So that's a great resource. Writing is a great resource. And that connection piece is, there's science in there or psychology in there that there's been a lot of research. I haven't read a lot of it, but I hear about it. And I see articles occasionally where I'll delve in a little bit. I'm not a big person in research. Like I'm not going to spend all my time going through all the details of the research. I just like to know the highlights. So
I remember, so I'll just add one last thing to that. I remember, so we just, if you don't know, we commonly know another gentleman named Ray Edwards. And
yes.
I was sitting in an event with Ray one time and he's a copywriter. Like he's phenomenal. That's his secret sauce right there. He's so good at it. And he said to us at a mastermind probably last year, do you know that until you write a thought down, the thought process is not completed? So you can think a thought in your mind, you can even say it to people, but until you actually start writing it down, that's what finishes the whole cycle of having a thought and doing something with it. So that like closes the entire loop in your brain. And I mean, I have like, I got journals everywhere. One thing that kind of makes me chuckle, I have like my planner that I write stuff down. I have my calendar that I write stuff down. I have my whiteboard and the wall and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes I'll be like, I know I wrote it down somewhere. So the other thing that I do use that actually helps me, because I get a lot of ideas when I'm driving or something like that, is I have recently started to use, I use a Pixel phone, but I know Apple products have the same thing, is that just the voice recorder.
Yes, voice.
So I'll just shout out like, hey, Google, can you take a note for me? And that helps too, because sometimes when we're away from the stuff, away from like the life, away from your desk, away from pen and pencil, we get a lot of great ideas that we want to be able to capture. So I've recently, at the advice of someone else that we know, Diana Gladney, I was like, wait a minute, you know what? That's a great idea. I should do that as well. So I have these little pockets that I love to collect ideas and help solidify stuff so that I can take that next step. And then I realize like, oh, I just wrote down 100 things. Okay, wait a minute. That's probably my biggest struggle is I have all these ideas and I'm like, wait a minute, 3? You want me to just execute on 3 for the day? Like, I can't possibly do that. I love doing more. So
yeah,
that helps me get focused. Definitely. When you just do no more than 3, then it's achievable. That's the premise of the gap in the gain idea, is that if I write down more than 3 things, then I'm going to overwhelm myself. And do you know, like as working moms and wives, and I know dads, like I feel like as men and women in 2024, we have so many things going on all the time. We can get so easily overwhelmed if I try to make my list and it's like 20 things or 100 things or something like that. And so really the idea is, how do we whittle it down so that we can actually achieve something over and over and over and over and create that habit?
I absolutely agree. So I there are other things that show up on my list, but I everything I do throughout my days, I try to remain focused on the top 3 priorities, and that's where the full focus helps me maintain focus. Is here's the big 3. If I do none of this other stuff, that's fine. But if I can do pieces of these big 3, then ideally I'm working towards my goals. That's how it's structured. Yeah. So no, that's wonderful. Now, it wasn't in your bio, but you also have a podcast. So I'm just going to go to, where can people find out more about the work you're doing? What are the resources?
Yeah, you bet. So I have a podcast that's called The Messy Middle, One Mom's Journey to Build a Profitable Business. And we just talk about kind of some of the same things that Dan and I are talking about. I feel like the life happens not for me. The most of adventurous part of life doesn't happen at the surface. It happens kind of like in the muck and the mire, what I call the messy middle. It's that journey. So being able to document the journey of building businesses. And then I also have a 6-step blueprint. I authored a book that got published last year that walks through some of the framework that I use, and we'll make sure and put a note in the show notes. And you can find me, Anita Anello. You can find me at anitaanello.com or all over social. I'm on all the different platforms. And if you want to engage, please reach out. I love meeting new people and talking to new people all the time.
And you can always find those links in the guest profile that I will have attached to this podcast at podcast.danw.us. All of those social links and everything will be right there in one nice, easy place to find. So, Anita, so I want to give credit to Ray Edwards. You mentioned him. Yes, have been and are in community with Ray, and he's not just a copywriter, but what a great inspiration to people that he connects with in general, but definitely to entrepreneurs in the online space. anybody that wants to learn how to improve website copy or marketing and sales copy, should certainly check out some of the work that he's got going on. And then if you want to know practically anything to do with video as an online entrepreneur, Diana Gladney is your resource. Now, I don't know her. I'm not personally in a relationship with her directly, but indirectly through Ray and some other community members, I have been a part and a participant of some of her work. And man, her YouTube channel has just, you can spend weeks going through those resources, but she's got something for everybody, all kinds of camera setups, and man, a wealth of information on how to do video better. So I'm glad you mentioned those two. Anita, thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. It's been a pleasure to host you on the podcast, and I look forward to continuing our conversations throughout this journey.
You bet. Dan, I just want to say one last thing. I just want to honor you and what you're doing. I thank you so much for the way that you show up every day to serve so faithfully, to be able to walk this journey out and share in a real public way, just the journey that you're walking on as an entrepreneur, as a coach, as a friend. Like, what you do matters. And I just thank you from the bottom of my heart to be able to be a part of it. And I just want to really acknowledge you in front of your audience of what great work you do. And what an opportunity. If you have an opportunity to go work with Dan, go ahead and take it. He's amazing. So great job.
Well, I really appreciate those heartfelt words. And again, I look forward to our conversations in the future. So with that, we'll wrap up this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, or you think someone else in your life would find value in this conversation, someone that might be in that space considering transition from the corporate world into coaching or consulting, make sure that you share this with them. But if you'll hit that follow or like or subscribe button, whatever it may be, I would definitely appreciate it. Until next time, I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Yep. Sounds good.